I'm Sari.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome, Alexia. We're so happy to have you on today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
So we open every episode with a little icebreaker, and today we have an icebreaker that was submitted by Holly N. So I'm going to read it here. So Holly says, since most of us have other creative endeavors other than sewing, what other hobbies do you do? So that's actually very related to our topic today. So maybe Alexia, you can start us off and tell us about all your other hobbies.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect. I feel very passionate about hobbies. I've never met a hobby I didn't want to do, I think. But really, I think I spend the most time outside of work knitting because it's so easy to do at home on the couch. And I love to garden. That is a big one. I discovered the joys of growing my own food a few years ago and have never looked back. Half of my backyard is now a pretty big garden. I love to cook and bake. During the pandemic, I could not go to my pottery studio, and I decided that I needed something else, so I started oil painting a little bit. I have a box of beads. I think that counts, right?
Totally counts.
That's an aspirational hobby, I guess.
Yeah, when I was moving, I found a big box of beads in my garage and like one of those bead boards, where you can line them up. And I was like, this has been in my garage for probably like 15 years.
It's just waiting for you.
Yeah, someday.
You should always have a hobby on deck.
Yeah. You never know when you need a new one, like in the wings. I don't know. I feel like those, sometimes you just have to switch gears and have a change of like creative scenery. And I feel like having a few different interests is really helpful for that.
Yeah, that's actually how I started knitting. My sewing machine broke.
Oh, really?
It was during the holidays and I wanted to make some gifts and my sewing machine broke. So I picked up this Good Housekeeping book that I had laying on my shelf and taught myself to knit and made a whole bunch of scarves.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh, I love it.
What about you, Haley?
Yeah, so I have a lot of similar hobbies to Alexia. I think my always forever happens on a weekly basis hobbies are sewing, cooking, and baking. Those are like my big three. I dabble in knitting. I've knit here and there, but I'm trying to really teach myself serious knitting in earnest this fall, winter, which has been fun. I've made some hats. I'm going to make some socks next. What else do I do? I roller skate. Love a good roller skate. I picked that up during the pandemic. I like having physical activity hobbies. And I always used to go to the gym, and then during the pandemic I couldn't. So I wanted something that was fun and joyful activity. And I think those are kind of my core hobbies, but I definitely dabble a lot. I'll pick up paints one week, I'll sketch, I just like doing anything that is a refresh of my creative state. I don't feel like my other creative hobbies can thrive unless I have all my other projects going.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Your roller skating, I'm so jealous. It sounds so fun. I'm so afraid of falling on roller skates that I just know I can't do it, but it looks so fun. And it reminded me, I also am hating the not going to the gym because I always like to take dance classes, like tap dance classes and ballet classes and stuff like that for physical activities. So much fun.
Yeah. Two of the people that we have a bunch of people who roller skate in our office, and 2 people have broken their wrists or arms in the last year.
Oh,
so I'm kind of a little bit freaked out.
Oh no. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nope. Not going to happen. Not for me.
But I'm a risk taker, even though I'm really, really clumsy. So maybe it's not a very calculated risk on my part, but
oh, I love it. That's awesome.
Sari, you're a hobbies person too. You got to tell us all about yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than sewing, knitting is also a big one for me. I've been knitting for many years and I love doing it. It goes in waves. It kind of depends on what else I'm doing. And we just finished watching Deadwood. So I did a lot of knitting while we were watching Deadwood, which is awesome.
Oh, that
awesome
show's
show.
so good. So good.
So I do a lot of knitting.
That's a really good knitting show.
Mm-hmm. I do a lot of other things. Like you guys, I garden a lot, both food and flowers. I really love roses. So I grow roses. And dahlias, my new house has a huge dahlia garden. So that's my new thing. I'm learning how to take care of dahlias. I do a lot of cooking. I do a lot of baking. And then, yeah, kind of like what Haley said, like I dabble in a lot of things. I've done ceramics before. I've done a lot of painting and drawing here and there, but that comes in waves too. I feel like sewing is my one constant. Sewing and knitting are pretty much my constants. And they complement each other really well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. They really do. Do you have a favorite like genre of knitting? Like color work or cables or things that are hard just for the sake of being difficult? Or I'm curious.
I like making socks because they're portable. So I find that really
that's a good one.
Convenient, and they make good gifts. So it's nice to knit socks throughout the year and then have a bunch of socks to give away when the holidays roll around. So I do like knitting socks, but I like making sweaters selfishly because I wear a lot of sweaters. So that's a fun thing. I like cables. I like color work. I like it all. I find just like with sewing, it's really helpful to vary the level of commitment and skill. So switching it up between something that's quick and easy and mindless and you don't have to pay a lot of attention to, and you can watch TV or listen to a podcast while you're doing, with something that's a little bit more mind intensive, I think is my approach.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I love that.
Well, I guess we'll just kind of jump into our questions because it like leads, this icebreaker is very complementary to what we're talking about today. So ceramics is like a big part of your creative practice. How and why did you choose to get into ceramics?
So about 5 years ago now, I had to sever a business relationship that was basically my entire career. All my eggs were in that basket at the time. I had been working way too hard for the previous 3 or 4 years up to that point, and just had like a major spiral burnout meltdown. I didn't know what was coming next. And I just felt like, God, I need something fresh and new. And my sister was getting ready to move to Los Angeles from Nashville. And I thought, oh, we should take a pottery class together before you leave. Like that would be a really fun thing for us to do. We could spend the day together, the day that we do it, and I get some nice sister time. And I've always loved ceramics. I've always collected pottery. I've always been attracted to it. And for some reason, I had never done it. I had made like, pinch pots in grade school, like everybody, but that's it really. So we signed up for a class at the local community center at the parks in Nashville. And the second week, I remember it kind of clicking. We were working on the wheel, which is extremely difficult in the beginning. And I just felt like, oh, yeah, whoa, this is amazing. Like just having my hands dirty and messy and muddy, and like the physical effort it takes to throw on the wheel is very engaging. And it's that meditative thing where you get in the flow and you really can't think about anything. It just kind of has to happen. And I find that state to be really hard to get to for me. I'm always thinking a lot, probably too much. I was like, oh, this is going to be good. I am excited about this. So I finished that 6-week class and then turned right around and signed up for another one. And at first I remember having a conversation with both my husband and my dad. And I was like, I'm not going to turn this into a thing. This is going to be my hobby thing. And they were like, yeah, sure. Right. Good luck with that. Yeah, it's such a part of my life now. I have a pottery studio and I go there multiple days per week. I'm constantly working on new pieces, and I do sell some of my work, but I try and keep some of my practice really just for me also, just to engage that like play aspect of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so far I've done a good job of doing that. It's hard to set those boundaries sometimes when you, I don't know, are a type. I wouldn't call myself a type A. I just really like having goals, especially creative ones. And, I like putting my work out there. It feels like the right relationship to me. So I have to watch that energy a little bit. And I feel proud of myself for doing that with pottery.
It makes me wonder about this type A thing. Maybe it's a creative type A, because I feel a lot of people who meet me in a work or creative context are oh, you're so type A. And I'm here I am.
Yeah.
For this I am.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yes. So agreed. It's a creative type A. Totally. Because I am so not, you can look at any of my workspaces and know that I am not actually type A outside of the creative work.
Yeah, I can identify with that. You mentioned that flow state that you get into when you're working on your ceramics. Is there what things about the practice do you find of sewing and ceramics do they have in common?
Oh gosh, the process. I think there's so much about it that's so similar in that it's a methodical practice that has practical limitations. There's only so many things that you can do. There are the rules of the medium, so to speak, that you have to work within. And if you don't like the process of A to Z, it doesn't really matter how much you want the outcome of the object that you're making. And I think anything where you're using materials to create something dimensional, you just have to like the actual steps of doing it to have it kind of stick and hit your heart and give you that moment of losing time and being in the flow and just kind of relaxing and letting life kind of fall away for a minute.
I'm curious about the physical aspects of it, because you talked about throwing on the wheel and how physical that is. And it's very physical. It requires a lot of strength, and especially a lot of core strength to keep everything stable. And I feel like it's that really interesting mix of that motor skill and intellectual skill and, combining all of those things that I feel helps put us into a flow state. And I wonder if you found that to be true, and if you find that to be true across, different hobbies that you're interested in.
Absolutely. I think sewing and throwing pots and gardening and maybe making bread are probably the four that have the most, I don't know, commonalities. Mm-hmm. Even though knitting is physical, it's in a different way. It's a little more minute. There's a little more brain space, I feel with knitting. But the physicality of gardening, especially, and pottery is so similar. You really work hard. And quilting is kind of like that too, sewing and quilting, those moments where you're you've been standing and sitting and you're ironing and back at the machine. And then, by the end of the day, you're wow, I really worked hard today on this. My body is tired. And there's something about that that's also pleasing, to be tired from something, physically tired from something that you love doing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you definitely have to have that hand-eye coordination, ability to envision dimension before it exists. I think that's such a sewing skill. And probably for me, having, almost 20 years of sewing under my belt before doing pottery, I feel the physical, that aspect of my imagination was so developed from sewing, from taking pattern pieces and being able to look at them and know what shapes that's all going to make in the end. That process probably really helped me envision what pots are going to look like eventually, or where I'm headed with what I'm making. I think there's a real crossover there. But yeah, man, some days of throwing at the wheel, I get home and I'm like, I am toast. I am so tired. I feel like I worked out all day.
I love that feeling. I just find that like so gratifying when I like spend all day out in the garden. Like in the early spring, you're getting everything ready and it's just like this huge like push of work. It's just like so rewarding. I love it.
It really is. It's really special. I feel like in modern times, like there's not a lot of scenarios for a lot of people where you can get that, like at work, a lot of people sit all day or a standing desk, like still you're not getting physically worn out. We do to ourselves on purpose with exercise, but I think there's something about engaging your brain and your body at the same time, just like you were saying, just that spot is pretty special. And I think it must be deep in us, to need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a book that I read recently called Burnout, which is about women and burnout, basically. And it's by Emily Nagoski. And she talks about the fact that you need physical activity to help complete stress cycles. So when you get stressed out, like evolutionarily, we need some kind of physical activity to release the pressure of stress. And we don't get that a lot in our day-to-day lives. And I feel like these activities like gardening and sewing and baking or anything that kind of gets you moving around while you're thinking and working through problems I think that's a big reason why it's such a stress reliever, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it definitely is, for sure.
So we've talked like a little bit about like the overlap between the sewing and ceramics, but you also are a fabric designer. And I'm curious how your ceramics practice has enriched your work as a fabric designer.
Oh my gosh, so much. I really don't know where I would be right now had I not found ceramics 5 years ago. I think there is a chance that it would have, like my path would have been so deeply altered by going through something so difficult in this field that I had been working in, which is fabric design. Yeah, I think there's a chance I would have like walked away had I not found, my spark again. I think it really, really turned me around creatively. It really enriched my perspective on everything. It helped me see that there is magic that happens if you can let go of what's going to sell. I think I had gotten a little bit bogged down with that. And I think that can be like the most stifling creative problem within a design field. It's just so easy to accidentally let your focus shift. And then, in my opinion, there's no great innovation or exciting new things when all you're thinking about is what's going to sell. That's like the way that art becomes stagnant and repetitive and only self-referential, and it loses the magic. So when I came back to designing fabric after taking a little bit of a break, finding a new company to work with Ruby Star Society, I was on fire. I was so amped up to get back to work. I wasn't doing any of the marketing and promotional side of the business anymore, which is what I had done at Cotton and Steel. And I think that's a part of what just got me like on that wrong channel of like, oh, I'm just bogged down with like how this is going to sell and not just like making compelling work that I know comes from a natural place. I think that inspired work is totally why I got to do a woven collection for the first time. And that really resonated with people. And I think it's because it came from just like a really authentic place. Yeah, I feel really lucky to have my joy in designing fabric back.
Yeah, your warp and weft collection is like one of just my absolute favorites. And there is something kind of like ceramic-y about it. The colors that you use, there's like this beautiful mix of like earth tones, and I love it. I got a big old stack in my sewing room.
Thank you. There's definitely some influence there. Staring at like the colors of the stages of making pots is really fun. Like the bisqueware, when you first fired it, gets all these like beautiful, warm, golden, peachy tones. And then, the clay itself has like such nice, warm colors when it's just raw clay. And then all the glazes. Yeah. Very inspiring environment.
Yeah, I think there's a real joy in material for a lot of these hobbies and in the raw material and what that represents for us. I wonder, how did ceramics influence what you make at the sewing machine? Did it influence your personal sewing?
I would say it definitely did. I think that I had always, before that, for personal sewing, been a real trip sewer. Like, that was always my big push, or Halloween. But with like the day-to-day stuff, it was always like, okay, I'm going to go on this trip. I got to get a bunch of stuff done. And I think it really shifted to, I want things that are more utility. Like, I want things that I can enjoy every day. Half the week I spend in like overalls covered in mud and glaze, but I want to make the overalls. So I think it shifted my thinking to be a little bit more deliberate about making pieces that I'm going to wear more often day to day. Making tops, stuff that I'm going to throw on with jeans. And yeah, it definitely shifted. I really hadn't thought about that. That's funny.
Are there any lessons that you feel like you've learned that you'd want to share with people about finding inspiration in other hobbies that maybe they can apply to another hobby like sewing? Do you think there's anything that's sort of universal?
The thing that comes to mind first and foremost is to not feel guilty about needing to switch it up. I think we have a hard enough time, as women, taking time for ourselves and not feeling guilt about that in general. And I think there's a lot of stigma about like, oh, you're flighty, like you want to do all these different things. You've got this big yarn stash and now you also need paintbrushes, like, stuff like that. I just feel like quieting that voice and not feeling bad for needing a change, needing to try something new, needing to try something different than something you've loved in the past. Like, just because you've loved it forever and you've invested so much time doesn't mean that it's always going to serve you. Sometimes we just need a change of pace. And I feel like our brains know when we need to try something new and when we need a new challenge that's going to be stimulating. And, in my experience, every time I have switched it up, I always come back to the thing I set aside with such fresh energy and excitement. So yeah, I think quieting that voice. And also, if you're a person with dexterity, which if you're a sewer, like you probably have a lot of extra sensory perception in your fingertips. Like it's just a part of, I think, being a person that's attracted to textiles. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to try anything else that is physically demanding of your hands, because more than likely, and especially ceramics, like I was saying earlier, you're probably going to have like a natural predilection for it. Even if you don't have the strength at first, I think there's just such a natural translation there of like fingertip to brain connection.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Alexia. I am so fascinated by all these connections that you've made between all these different hobbies. It's made me think a lot more deeply about my own hobbies and how they all connect together, and maybe want to get back to ceramics now that things are opening up a little bit again.
Yeah,
me too.
Do it.
Oh my God.
It's so much fun. It really is. There's something about playing in the mud, gardening or ceramics, either one, that's just like, it just takes you back. It just makes you feel like a kid. It's good.
Yeah. I love getting dirty.
More childlike joy.
Yes, exactly. Yep. I think that's what I'm constantly chasing, probably, is just like when you're a kid, that feeling, trying something new, doing something new. It's special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that beginner feeling too.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's great. It's a very, very magical moment, I think. And so is mastery, like that moment where you have been doing something long enough that you're like, oh, that thing I have in my head, that dress that I want to make, I can make that like from materials. Like I can do that. That's such a great feeling too.
Yeah. There are different joys at all points along that continuum.
Absolutely.
Well, where can people find you, Alexia, if they want to follow you?
On Instagram, I am Alexia Marcel Abegg, and you can find my website at the same thing, alexiamarcelabegg.com. And you can see my fabric at rubystarsociety.com and also on their Instagram.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was so fun talking.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about hobbies.
And Haley and I will see you next week on Seamwork Radio. Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.